the ratio on the horizontal is the relationship between how much debt a corporation is in and how much profit it makes. Okay, so the further to the right you go horizontally, the more indebted a corporation is. Okay, the more it's dependent on debt to keep on going, to stay in business, right? So you can see the big oil corporations have a relatively low debt dependency. They're making more profit for the debt which they owe. I mean, they do have debt dependency, but it's not as high as some of them we'll see in a minute. Okay, now the degree of debt leverage on the companies increases as the price of oil falls. So you can see the little blue and the little pink buttons. Moving to the right means the price of oil is falling. So the more the price of oil falls, the more indebted these corporations become. Okay, which again is kind of like common sense, right? They can't sell as much, they've got lower revenue. In order to stay in business, they've got to keep on borrowing. Okay. Now we come down, this is from the Financial Times. We go to the next slide. This is shale industry, and you can see basically the companies are moving over to the right. The shale industry is far higher debt leveraged than the big oil corporations, the multinational oil corporations are. Okay, in other words, they're much more vulnerable, therefore, to any fall in the price of oil. Okay, in terms of whether they fall in or out of profitability and how much they rely on raising funds to keep them in business. Next, please. This graphic shows you the reduction in capital expenditure from different categories. The third one from the right are shale oil companies. They have massively reduced their capital expenditure, but then so have then state oil companies, the second from the left, and the one on the far left, they're not on the far left in reality, but on this graph, the big oil companies have really reduced their capital expenditure. Actually, not as much as you might think if you think of it overall. So overall, since the COVID crisis started, capital expenditure has been reduced by about 25% overall, but they're still planning to invest a lot in the oil industry. It's not like it's gone down the drain, it's just reduced. Okay, next. What has been severely challenged, and this has been really not much commented on at all, is the market capitalization of the big oil corporations, which on average have plummeted in the space of this year to date, by 40%. This is particularly important for the UK actually compared to the US. If you look at Shell and BP, at the beginning of the year, their combined market capitalization was about $370 billion. I think that this is about 10 or 12% of the entire UK stock market. Okay, so if they fall, it pulls down the rest of the stock market much more than in, say, even the US, which is also dependent on oil corporates as well. But you can see in any case at the bottom, you can see that the FTSE, the UK stock index, has actually gone down more than the US Dow Jones index. And I think that's because of, for at least in part, I'm sure it's a lot more other factors, but at least in part, it shows you, it's an indicator of the extreme reliance of the UK and actually France on their oil majors. Shell was the biggest payer of dividends in the UK for the last 10 years, single biggest payer of dividends. You know, so in other words, there's a lot of property income depends on these corporations. Next. Ah, now he's finally got there. Okay, what is to be done? All right. Well, I'm going to leave this mostly for discussion, partly because of time and partly because, you know, the particular focus of this talk, but I will make 2 or 3 points before ending, right? So if we go to the next. All right. I think this is the last graphic. This one is from one of these big oil price consultancies. Oh, I should say a big parenthesis, but I do find it interesting, right? In 2016, there was a commodities price business. There's an awful lot of money in tracing the price of oil and other commodities and selling that information, right? So this business was sold. It's called Argus Media. It was sold from its current owner to a US owner for $1.6 billion. And in this sale, it was discovered that they have 750 analysts, 750 analysts working for them. Okay, so that's just one company have 750 analysts working out what's going on in these commodity markets. Okay, so this is a graphic for one such company, Rystad, which is a sort of a major influence in this field. And it's the green thing which you want to look at, right? And they're basically saying here that they think that when did they publish this? Beginning of April, I think, right? They're saying here that by sometime in May, oil storage is going to run out. Okay. Now, why is this important? It's important in terms of seeing there's a real motive behind Trump for getting the US back to work, right? He's trying to get the economy moving again. And this is obviously, as a general point, you'd expect them to do that. But there is a very particular point as well, right? If he doesn't do that, then this minus 36 won't be just a blip. It will be a massive generalized problem, right? So he has to get America moving again in order to save it from a more generalized catastrophic crisis. Okay, next. This is referring to one of the big structural issues in terms of, I haven't had time to talk about Canada. Canada is a high cost producer. Canadian oil industry is desperate to get its product to market. That's its biggest problem. And so it's really pushing hard to have pipelines all over the place, including across indigenous land all over the place. And so you see these big pipeline projects have become the locus of a real conflict. So the red one is the biggest one, which Obama stopped and Trump agreed to, and I think it's going ahead, which is known as Keystone XL. That's very big. But the blue one is another one from the Dakota oil fields, and it's the protest against the Dakota access pipeline, which was what's happening at Standing Rock. So they're actually two different pipelines, but they're triggered by the same sort of motive, which is to get oil out from the interior of North America out to market. And so the last slide is of the Standing Rock protest. Next. So this was this is in North Dakota, I think, and you can see, I'm sure you saw it in the news, all these battles in Standing Rock. I think in effect the camp has been cleared now, and they are taking legal action to try and stop the pipeline. But defend the sacred is the message which they are putting here. Now, with the current oil crisis, defend the sacred is not only the ancient burial grounds and the lake, which this would have contaminated, but is also defending the sacred means defending human life in the cities, because what this push to return to production before it's safe to do so means that, you know, urban populations as well as rural populations are being going to be put at massive risk in order to save the system. What is to be done? That's it. That's my presentation.